A warm welcome also from my side. My name is Johannes Bergmeier. I'm General Secretary of WPO, the World Packaging Organization. It's my honor to welcome you on one of our most stunning and interesting webinars we had in the last weeks. Be prepared, it will be very intense because it's a little bit tricky topic, yeah? But nevertheless, it's a very important topic, so we have to face it, and have to find some solutions. But I guess we are used to this in packaging industry, that we find even good solutions for some tricky topics at all. We are talking today about PFAS, a very special group of chemicals. And our headline today is, are you ready for the impending PFAS compliance under PPWR in Europe? PPWR, you will hear about it. You know, it's our new legislation here on packaging waste. We have in Europe already in force, and the first interesting steps will now come into force on 12th of August. And this is a date many people fear already about, because they don't know how they should fulfill the requirements on these special chemicals we are talking today. Nevertheless, be prepared. This topic, PPWR, will be our companion for at least the next 10, 15 years, I guess, something like this, because this PFAS topic is just the start of everything. We will have many more webinars on the PPWR to get ready for the big package of revolutioning packaging and handling of packaging waste here in Europe. The good thing is it's not me alone to be here today. Thank you. You heard already Nerida. She today has a little bit more the listening role, which is a little bit unusual for me, but okay. Hello, Nerida, our Vice President Sustainability and Packaging That Saves Food in WPO. But beside this, we have really two high qualified speakers today. Please welcome Lena Wimmer and Dr. Manfred Tucker. Both are part of our partners here in Vienna. We are partners here in the office with them, and they are working at Circular Analytics and the Packaging Cockpit. And if you're somehow active in Austria and in Europe on PPWR issues and on sustainable packaging issues, I'm quite sure you heard these two names already. So I give the floor immediately to Lena because she's starting the presentation. And welcome, Lena. Please tell us first a little bit about PPWR, and I think then we jump into the topic of the PFAS chemicals. Lena, please.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. So as Johannes just told us, we are starting with an update regarding the PPWR. Because even though it was accepted last year, there are some new aspects to it. So first of all, we will touch upon the roles of economic operators, because this is really the basic for understanding everything with regards to PPWR. And with that, the declaration of conformity and the conformity assessment goes hand in hand, meaning we touch upon those two topics just to have like a recap and to know that everyone is knowing what we're talking about. And then I also brought two updates with me. One, the Commission delegated the decision on like reusable packaging. And the second one is like a technical proposal regarding the harmonized labeling for waste separation. So as I just stated, we are starting with the economic operators. Of course, the PPWR that's a new few rules and also new definitions. So as you can see here on the slides, we have 5 economic operators with regards to the PPWR. So first of all, to start on the left-hand side, we have the supplier who supplies, for example, packaging material to the producer. And the supplier is obliged to provide all the necessary information in order for the producer to be able to demonstrate the conformity. Then on to the producer, the second one from the left-hand side, we have the producer, and the producer could be either a manufacturer, an importer, or a distributor. Meaning this role of the producer combines all those 3 obligations, meaning that depending on which of the 3 definitions you are, you have different obligations. However, the producer is always the one who is obligated to have all the EPR obligations. So on to the central definition of the manufacturer. The manufacturer is the one who produces the packaging or packaged products under his own name or trademark. And the manufacturer is here obliged for the assessment of conformity and drawing up of the technical documentation, and also for the DOC. Meaning the manufacturer needs all the data he can get from the supplier in order to be able to demonstrate the conformity. Then, as we are a really international audience here, the importer is also a really important person with regards to PPWR, meaning that here the importer is defined as a person which is established within the union, and it's placing packaging from a third country on the market. And here the importer has to review the conformity assessment and the documentation as well as the labeling. And also has to foresee that all the necessary documents and informations are being provided, and the manufacturer has compiled with all the obligations set within the articles 5 to 12. And last but not least, we have the distributor, which is the one who delivers the packaged products to the end user. And the distributor has a duty of care, meaning that he has also to check if the assessment of conformity is valid and also if there is a DOC or not. For the remainder of the webinar, we will mainly focus on the manufacturer and the importer, as we are also, as I already said, we have a really international audience, and those are the ones who are most important for the following minutes. To touch upon the articles which are the most relevant ones for the Declaration of Conformity, meaning the articles 5 to 12. I have some key obligations brought with me today. So first of all, we have the substances of concern, where Manfred later will touch upon the PFAS limits, which will be set in force from August this year onwards. Then the second really important obligation is that each and every packaging which is being put on the European market has to be recyclable from 2030 onwards. And recyclable here means that the packaging has to achieve a recyclability rating over 70% in order to be deemed recyclable. And if that wasn't enough, we also have to see that plastic packaging has recycled content. And here a minimum percentage of 10% of post-consumer recyclate content in plastic packaging is being set. And this is, a really important topic because as you may know, post-consumer recyclate is not available in that huge amounts, especially with regards to polyolefins. So we also have to have a look in order to tackle this problem. Then the fourth obligation is the packaging minimization, meaning that from 2030 onwards, the volume and weight of packaging has to be as low as possible. So, for example, if you overpackage your products, you have to foresee or to see to it that you have to minimize your packaging. Then usability is also a very big topic of the PPW, as well as labeling, where we'll touch upon in a few slides. And then we also have restricted packaging formats, meaning that there are some kinds of packaging formats, as for example, like miniature packaging, or also collation shrinks for the to hold different packaging units will be restricted from 2030 onwards. And here the last obligation on the slide, the compliance obligation, is also more or less the most important one, because without compliant packaging, you won't be able to put your packaging on the European market. So this is it for the roles of the economic operators. And now we look a bit more further into the Declaration of Conformity. So the Declaration of Conformity, or the conformity assessment per se, is more or less the DNA of compliance. Of course, without it, you won't be able to put your packaging on the European market. So here the first step is to see that the assessment is carried out in accordance with the requirements of Articles 5 to 12, meaning all with regards to PFAS, to heavy metals, to recyclability, to recycled content, and so on. And this assessment has to be demonstrated in the technical documentation. as well as the standards and specifications you have used for your packaging. You have has also be listed in the technical documentation. Then, if that has been prepared, we are at the point that we can issue a declaration of conformity. Meaning, in the declaration of conformity, we provide the evidence for the articles 5 to 12, which is further defined in the Annex 7. And here the manufacturer is responsible for the accuracy of the evidence, meaning that the manufacturer is reliant on the supplier to have the correct data. And he is responsible to draw up the technical documentation and also the declaration of conformity. Yes. And that everything is valid throughout the documentation process. And then last but not least, every type of packaging that is being placed in the European market requires a DOC, meaning that you really have to look for it and really prepare it in advance and not just on request, but really start preparing now, because it's really important that you be able to demonstrate it and to show your DOC from the 12th of August onwards. And just once again, all your statements have to be supported by the relevant documents, meaning technical documentation. And also another important topic is that you have to save those documentations, meaning that there's a retention period for single-use packaging of 5 years and for reusable packaging for 10 years. So there's much data that has to be stored and also much data that has to be provided upon request from the authorities. But what should DOC look like? So with Annex 8, we have like an example of a DOC. So the most important steps that the DOC has to include are listed there in Annex 8. So you all can have a look afterwards into the PPWR and see where and what is there listed. Just once again, the DOC must demonstrate the fulfillment of all articles 5 to 12. And it always has to be on the latest version and has to be translated to the required languages of the member states. So probably most member states will allow English, but also the national languages will be the ones that the DOC can be provided at. So yeah. And the authorities will then be able to check your DOCs, and you have to provide any further information upon requests, as for example, the technical documentation. I've also brought like a graphic with me to demonstrate it more clearly and more visibly, probably. So also, especially for those who are manufacturers outside of the EU, to understand who is responsible for what. So here on the right-hand side, we have the producer definition once again. And here we see that the producer really combines all three other economic operators, meaning the importer, the manufacturer, and the distributor. But once again, the importer is the one who imports the packaged finished goods from non-EU countries. But which obligations apply now to the one who's manufacturing finished products outside of the EU? And here it is important that the products consist of product and packaging and not only one component of it. So the manufacturer provides the information to the importer, all information about material specifications, then evidence of compliance with, for example, the limits of heavy metals and PFAS, but also about the content of the recycled content in the plastic packaging, for example. And here, the manufacturer is also jointly responsible for the technical documentation, together with the one who is the importer on the European country, so in the EU. And this joint responsibility also includes like material labeling to see to it that all the correct labeling is on the packaging. Also regarding the proof of recycled content, there's a shared responsibility. Then also with regards to recyclability, there's cooperation, also shared responsibility, and also both economic operators have to draw up the technical documentation and declaration of conformity together. However, the one who is then obliged to pay the EPR fees is the importer in the EU. And yeah, here we see the line with the preparation of DOC, where we also see that it's a shared responsibility and not one is like solely responsible for the DOC. So on to the next topic. So more of an update regarding the Commission delegated decision. So actually last week or 2 weeks ago, the Commission published a delegated decision with regards to logistic packaging. As you may know, we have like the reusability targets that are being set with the PPWR. However, there was always like bad comments that, for example, stretch films and strappings are within those 100% targets. And this is not really feasible to have straps and stretch film in 100% reusability. So the European Commission has a delegated decision drawn up, which says that the stretch film and the strapping are exempted from the 100% targets. However, for the 40% targets, those packaging components still apply. So the whole transport packaging unit has to have a reusability rating of 40% from 2030 onwards. And then the last update I brought with me today is the technical proposal by the JRC on the EU-wide harmonized labeling for waste separation. So here the technical proposal was published mid-January, and this proposal specifies the legal labeling requirements, in particular under the Articles 12 and 13 of the PPWR. And this technical preparation is preparation for all the implementing acts which will be following. And this means that we see the direction in which it's going, but it's not still in law, so it's not legally binding as of now. But we will see the direction which labeling will be on the packaging in the foreseeable future. And the consequences of this technical proposal are that national rules will not be permitted in the future. So, for example, we know from France the three-man logo. This will not be doable, or there will not be three-man logo on the packaging from 2028 onwards. And also any other national measures have to be repealed or adapted before the date to enable the transition to the harmonized labeling system. And also another really important information is that there should be no alphanumeric material codes after the 12th of August of 2028, meaning that the triangle with the material code inside will also not be permitted from 2028 onwards. And yeah, on the right-hand side, we see a draft on how the harmonized labeling can look like, or will probably look like. So we have on the one hand a color scheme, and on the other hand, we have like a pictogram scheme in order to enable the consumer to sort their waste efficiently and correctly. Yeah, so the conclusion of the first part of this webinar is the complexity is definitely increasing, but also slowly the rules are getting a bit clearer, and we will have like directions on which we will have to look for in the future. So on to you, Manfred, and a more deep dive on the topic of PFAS.
Thank you, Lina. So now going on to the PFAS topics. From the 12th of August this year on, all packaged food products put on the European market have to be compliant with the Article 5 of PPWR. And this article restricts PFAS content in food packaging. PFAS is the acronym for per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances here. And today I would like to present an method for assessing the PFAS compliance in packaging, and this method was developed by Circular Analytics and implemented through the packaging cockpit. And the challenge we have here is that the regulation is developing faster than the operational guidance, which is not very uncommon here, at least in Europe. And our goal was therefore to develop a scientifically robust, practical, and scalable methodology that allows companies to manage PFAS compliance across the packaging portfolio. Here, I would like to start with introducing the concept behind the methodology. Here, in packaging, PFAS have been used for functional purposes, for example, to create grease barriers or to improve processability, especially for plastic packaging. Our methodology addresses this challenge by providing a structured, risk-based framework for PFAS compliance assessment. And this means that instead of relying only on testing, which can be expensive and inefficient, we combine scientific evidence, material knowledge, and verification steps. Next slide, please. So when developing the methodology, we started here from several key objectives. First is scientific credibility. So the methodology is based on published scientific data and evidence. And here it can be used by the manufacturer of the packaged goods or by the suppliers of these goods to the manufacturer. Then the scope. Here we look at all food packaging placed on the market. Here, after the cutoff date of the 12th of August, and here the limit values that have to be fulfilled are very low. If you look at the individual non-polymeric PFAS, they have to be lower than 25 parts per billion. The sum of all non-polymeric PFAS has to be lower than 250 pp parts per billion, and 50 ppm is the limit for the total PFAS content that includes polymer PFAS, and where a screening assay, the total fluorine content is proposed by the Commission. Next slide, please. So now looking here into the materials where PFAS can be found. The first one is in paper cardboard packaging, for example, in grease barriers. Here, PFAS were much in use in historical applications, but also fiber molded packaging and fiber composite packaging can contain PFAS, for example, again, as grease barriers or as water barriers. Then in plastics, the concentrations of PFAS are usually lower than in paper packaging. But here, PFAS are very often used as processing aids and for surface treatments, for example, for anti-fog coatings of plastics. And even steel and aluminium packaging are not free from PFAS. There is a certain probability that inner coatings of cans, for example, contain PFAS. Next slide, please. So the PFAS risk matrix, here, this structure was here found that we combined here the scientific literature, so the studies where we find here PFAS in certain food packaging applications. This we combined with our data from here compositions of food packaging. Then we defined here PFAS applications together with companies and looked at industrial strategies and the use of processing aids and geographically at different regions globally here to combine all this information in a risk matrix here with classes 1 to 4. 1 and 2 classes have a very low risk of containing PFAS. 3 medium risk, here where a lot of historically documented PFAS applications are known, and class 4 packaging applications have high risk that shows typical PFAS applications, for example, in paper packaging with grease barriers. Next slide, please. So the connection to the packaging cockpit. So some of you know this software here we developed here at the packaging cockpit. And here this software enables here the management of packaging data containing the whole detailed composition of packaging. And these packaging material data are integrated with supplier informations, and we can assign here the risk values, the risk levels, according to our risk matrix to each component of the packaging and generate the documentation here. This digital integration is very important because many companies have to manage thousands of different types of packaging items. Manual compliance management would therefore be extremely inefficient, and by integrating the methodology into a digital system, companies can achieve scalable compliance management. Next slide, please. Here, a key concept of our methodology is the gradual approach as well. I show it here on this slide. Here, this is a stepwise process, and these steps include first the initial risk identification of each packaging component. Here, of course, you have to know the packaging composition you are talking about, and then you can classify each of the components of the packaging to a risk class 1 to 4. The second step is then to classify the entire packaging, which is the sum of all individual components of the packaging, and some information about processing, and collect supplier declarations. And the third step is to ensure the PFAS compliance by setting here this information about risk classes and supplier declarations in a quality management system, and select here the optimal test strategy and embed here the results in a declaration of conformity. What is important, the whole database is supplied by WPO, which takes care of the documentation as well, where all of these supplier declarations and packaging composition data are put in one database. Next slide, please. So here I show you an example of a risk matrix for paper, which is an excerpt. Here, the whole risk table is already published in a pre-reviewed form. It is now in the process of scientific review, and we expect here the publication of the reviewed paper in, I would say, end of 3 or 4 weeks. So for paper, here the risk classifications depends on such factors as, is there virgin paper used, which has a very, very low risk class of A1. For example, you see on the other classified as 4, you have paper recycled with the highest risk class, because you cannot be sure what is on the input side of the recycled. Wax coating, hot melt adhesives have very low risk, as well as silicone coating. Risk class 3 is, for example, in paper laminates, when you have a combination of plastic films and paper, because of here the lamination adhesives or the processing of the plastic films. Next slide, please. Here a full example here of a risk assessment of a tray packaging consisting of a polyethylene cardboard tray, a lid consisting of a multi-layer film, mainly polyethylene, EVOH, polyamide in this case, and then a paper label with printing on it. And the assessment, if you look at all the individual materials of the packaging components, you come to a classification of 3 for the plastic film laminated onto the cardboard. And this is due to the lamination adhesives and processing aids for the polyethylene film on the tray. For the PE, EVOH, PA film, you have a risk assessment of 3 as well. This is the reason for this is again processing aids used for the multi-layer films, and the second important factor are lamination adhesives. If you have an anti-fog coating on the film, for example, then you would have a risk of 4, which is the highest risk, because this is one of the very typical applications of PFAS. The paper level, you see it's in brackets, because it's not considered as food contact material in this case, so it can't be left out from the comparisons. So the overall result of the whole packaging is 3, risk class 3. Therefore, you need here, next to the supplier declarations and the detailed composition of the packaging materials, here you would need additional test results from the supplier, or you would have to provide the testing as well. Next slide. So now going on the next 3 slides on the specific procedures here, going into detail. For example, we would recommend for each company putting packaged food products on the European market here to start with the status quo analysis, and here determine the company specific approach to PFAS, because of course this will be different, for example, to for retailers which have their own brands, for brand manufacturers, for bottlers, or for packaging manufacturers or importers. Here, as Lina discussed before, when you are out of Europe, then the importer has all the legal obligations to provide the declaration of conformity, including PFAS. Then, of course, it depends on the number of items, material types, and upstream suppliers. So it can get very difficult and complex here to make sure that each one of your suppliers provides the supplier declarations, and you make sure that you test enough of these suppliers here so that you can comply with the legislation. What we see on the market, data availability is already a huge problem, because many retailers or brand owners do not really have access to the packaging composition, which is, as you saw, very important here to come at a risk assessment of the packaging. And of course, it makes a difference if the packaging components come from the EU or outside the EU, because the legal situations are different in Europe and the rest of the world. The next step, second one, is you have to create the document, the risk matrix. We went through this and prioritize here all the packaging with categories 3 and 4. Next slide. Now the next one. Yeah, thank you. That the implementation and complete documentation is the next step here, to ensure that you have all the supplier declarations and fill in all the data gaps, especially in the packaging compositions, and obtain the test results you need. And fourth is putting all these data together here for the PFAS compliance of the individual packaging. And it's important that you can answer the question, why is the packaging compliant? So your system must be set up in such a form that you can answer this question. Next slide, please. Yeah, and all the documentation and necessary should be in one system, of course, because when the authorities want data about your packaging, you have at most 10 days time to provide all the necessary information. So it is necessary that it is here in one system, and you don't have to prepare the necessary documents in this 10 days period. Next slide. So currently, we are working on the integration of all the necessary procedures in the packaging cockpit. So that is the materials list and the risk classifications of each material. This we are here in the process of finishing already this part. And then here there is a development of a questionnaire process as well, where you as a supplier or a brand owner have some additional help here to know what additional information you need from your suppliers. Next slide. And I would say this was the end from my side, and going back to Lina. Thank you.
Exactly. So to keep the next part a bit shorter and quicker than planned, because so that we have enough time for your questions. The clock is ticking right now. So until the 12th of August, there are approximately like 5 months left, which means like approximately 100 working days and approximately 8,000 working hours, meaning that we really have to see to it that all the technical documentation, but also the DOC, especially for the articles 5, 2, and 11, which will enter into force on 12th of August, are ready in order for all the products to be still be placed on the market after this date. So to get to the roadmap, the key milestones and deadlines. So we have more or less 3 key milestones with regards to the PPWR. So the first one is August 2026, where we have to see to it that that the packaging we want to put on the market is compliant with heavy metals, with PFAS, and with the reusability obligations set in Article 11. Then with 2028, we have to additionally be compliant with the compostability requirements and labeling requirements set under PPWR. And then from 2030 onwards, we have to additionally be compliant with the recyclability requirements, with the plastic recyclate usage rates, and with the minimization requirements, and many, many more requirements with the PPWR in mind. However, we have to see to it that we have our technical documentation, also our declaration of conformity, prepared from phase 1 onwards through all the phases. And for sure, the technical documentation, or also the DOC, has to be compiled with each phase of more obligations and more requirements. And then they have to, so from just Articles 5 to 11, from 2026 onwards, we have then Articles 9 and 12 additionally from 2028 onwards. And then from 2030 onwards, we all have the Articles 5 to 12 to demonstrate in the DOC and also in the technical documentation. So to sum that up and to draw a conclusion from the last 40 minutes, so compliance is not a project for 2030, but a task that has to start right now, today, especially regarding the first requirements, including the PFAS requirement, which will apply from August 2026 onwards. This means that the portfolios should be analyzed today in order to reduce tomorrow's risks. And the second conclusion, or also call to action, is that data is the new raw material in the packaging world, meaning that transparency is not a nice to have. Actually, you need transparency, especially regarding your packaging data, in order to be able to demonstrate conformity. Of course, only those who have their supply chain and material data under control can demonstrate conformity of the packaging in the future. So thank you for having us, and we are now open to all your questions.
Thank you so much, Lena and Manfred. As always, a very outstanding presentation and many, many things clarified, I guess, but even maybe more questions coming up, and always in this topic in the chat. Yeah, we still have about 15 minutes, and so I try to go through the most important questions. For the audience, some remarks. Sorry for the troubles at the very beginning. Somehow we have been limited suddenly to 100 participants. We don't know why this is. Meanwhile, we solved the issue and we have much more. But sorry for everybody who came in late because of this. Then maybe you have missed this information. We will share the video, the recording of this workshop session on our channels, mainly YouTube and LinkedIn and so on. And so you can go through it as many times as you like. Lena and Manfred, I'm not sure who always will answer this question, but I will try to go through the most important one. One was about Article 15, yeah, which requires also a marking of the packaging item. And this is also starting at August. Do you have any idea how this could work? Does it mean that we have to mark with printing or somehow every packaging with the identification code, or how is this running?
With regards to Article 15, which draws up the manufacturer obligations, this means that you have to demonstrate the manufacturer on the packaging, meaning that you have to write the product is produced or the packaging is filled by XYZ, which is located in XYZ. And this is the marking which is talked about in Article 15.
Okay. Thank you for this. Then another question is about the declaration of conformity. Yeah, there was an example. Do we have to do this declaration of conformity for every packaging system, or because normally we then have combined systems? Yeah, that means you have a primary packaging with a secondary packaging, everything packed in a corrugated box. This is then on a pallet with a shrinking film. Do I need a declaration of conformity for each item separately or for the whole system?
It depends, actually.
It depends.
So it depends.
That's the answer.
I think it's like so it depends on in which combination you sell your packaging to the consumer. So for example, if you just sell your primary packaging to the consumer, you have to draw up a POC for the primary packaging, for the secondary, and for the tertiary packaging. However, if, for example, you have like a product which combines different primary packaging, you have like secondary packaging, then you have to draw it up for primary and secondary together. And there probably won't be any or hardly any cases where you have to draw it up for everything in combination. Of course, there's hardly anything sold to the consumer on a pallet. So it really depends on the use case.
Okay, thank you for this. And an additional question there, is it enough to forward the declaration of conformity of my supplier, or do I have to issue a new one on behalf of my company, my entity?
It also depends. So you definitely can use the information which is provided by your suppliers, but I cannot give a overall answer to that, because it depends. If your supplier just, for example, supplies you with parts of the packaging, you can't just forward that declaration of conformity. Of course, for example, as a manufacturer, it could also be the case that you assemble different parts of packaging and that you fill it with your filling good. And then you have like a different packaging specification than the one of your packaging provider, which is just providing, for example, a cap to a bottle.
And then you have to issue your own thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So always when you do something with it, or if you create a new system, let's call it like this, or new level of system. Okay.
Yes,
Then there was a question at the very beginning. I think, Manfred, it was you, yeah, talking about what are PFAS, yeah. But is there a definition already? What falls under PFAS? What does not fall under PFAS?
Yes, there is a very specific definition in the Article 5 of the PPWR, which is based on the OECD definition, but here defines it still further by eliminating a few PFAS which would be in the OECD definitions but are considered as not relevant in the PPWR case. So look for a definition into Article 5.
Okay, thank you for this. Then there is a question on transition periods. Yeah, this everything gets into force on 12th of August now. What is with the things I produced already, or they're on the market already? Normally, European Commission is also giving such transition provisions on ready-made products.
So actually, there will not be any transitional periods, meaning that you have to place all that is produced before 12th of August on the market. However, everything that is on the market does not have to be in conformity. It just applies to the products which will be placed on the market after the 12th of August. However, you have to see to it that you place all your stock on the market beforehand in order for it not going to waste.
Okay, thank you. Then we have a question on the testing methodology for sure. We have this question: when is it published? what's about extraction? Yeah, because it's not only maybe about the method of measuring, testing the amount, but maybe you also need a extraction, migration, whatever method or something like this. Do you have any information on this?
Yes, here this is a very critical point. Thank you for this question. Here there is no reliable method on polymeric PFAS at the moment. There is at least no harmonized method. The same holds true even for the monomeric PFAS. What is done then is here there are different methodologies here on the market from different laboratory suppliers here that test between 20 and more than 100 individual PFAS, monomeric, non-polymeric PFAS. Yeah, and for the polymeric PFAS, usually the total fluorine content is measured, but that measures anorganic fluorine as well. So then you have to use the total organic here carbon fluorine value here where you do an extraction before and just look at the organic PFAS. And if this is still too high, then here you would need the reasons why there are other materials in the packaging that are not PFAS, so that you can comply with the demands. So put it together. There are no harmonized methods at the moment. What you can do is use what the Commission recommends. That means total fluorine, and then here total organic fluorine, and then going further into details for the sum of polymeric and non-polymeric PFAS. And the other one is test for monomeric or non-polymeric PFAS when you have reason to think that there could be some in there. But at the moment, unfortunately, you are not sure that you find all relevant non-polymeric PFAS because there is no generally acceptable methodology on the market.
That's one of the tricky things, I guess.
One of the tricky things, yeah.
Then, so this was the methodology. Going in the chat again, there is one question: what is considered a detailed receipt? Yeah, I think you have it in one of your charts that you need the detailed receipt for the declaration of conformity, I guess.
Yeah, this is first. We developed our methodology based on the German minimal standard and the SEN proposal on design for recycling for plastic materials. That was the starting point. And then we looked what additional informations we need here to do these risk classifications. And then we found out that approximately 10 more informations are necessary, starting, for example, with is there here grease resistant or water barrier for fiber-based packaging, or are there some functional coatings? These are the main things here put on the packaging. So it's mainly the list in the German Mindeststandard with some additional here informations we need, but it's not the detailed composition with all the additives, for example, in a plastic packaging, because you would not get this anyways.
We talked already, two more questions, then we have to finish, I guess. Yeah, we talked already about this marking thing. Yeah, in Article 15. Yeah, there is an additional question because they can't believe it. Is it also true for, let's say, a shrink film of a pallet? Yeah, because this is not printed at all. How should you mark it? And can you link it maybe somehow with the lot number or something like this? This is also the idea of some participants here in the discussion.
Yeah, I think we have to see how the practice will, or how how reality will solve itself. So there's no real obligation or no real definition on how to proceed in the PPWR. But I can see how it is complicated to mark a shrink film. It's more about like not the packaging itself, but like to know like so the producer or the manufacturer or the producer of the packaging would probably, or the user of the packaging would probably also be the one who puts the product on the market. So you have somewhere this producer manufacturer information somewhere on the packaging anyways, via lot numbers or whatever.
Okay. One very last question, because it's very interesting. Yeah, somebody's asking it, but I think it's very realistic. Yeah, what would you consider the absolute minimum of what you have to do until 12th August? And there's also one prepared question. What is the consequence if we don't meet these PFAS regulations now on 12th August? What is the absolute minimum that you say, but you have to do this, otherwise you really have big problems?
You have.
Lina.
Please start. No,
Lina
please
first.
start, Manfred. I will
Okay,
continue
Manfred,
with everything else.
Yes, I would say it is absolutely the minimal thing to make sure that you are compliant with PFAS. Otherwise, you cannot put the packaging on the market. And here, as you saw from our presentation, it's not possible just to do one part of the whole thing. When you do not have the composition of the packaging, you can't do here the risk assessment. And if you have no tests, how should you be able here to secure the conformity of the packaging for the market? So at least for food packaging in direct food contact, this is the absolutely necessary.
Yes, and apart from PFAS, you also have to see to it that your packaging has no heavy metals, and that the limits for heavy metals usage are met. So the limit here is 100 milligrams per kilogram. And then apart from Article 5, so the obligations of Article 5, if you have like reusable packaging, you also have to comply with Article 11, which gives you more detail about how your reusable packaging has to look like and which obligations your reusable packaging has to meet. So, for example, has to be able to be filled, emptied, etc., without destroying the packaging. And there are some more obligations to it. And then for sure, you have to see to it that you have your technical documentation prepared for Articles 5 and 11, if they are applicable, and then also your DOC with regards to Article 5 and if applicable to Article 11. And we also talked about sanctions. So the first sanction is that if your product is already on the market, that your product will be withdrawn from the market. Then if your product is not yet on the market, you won't be able to put your packaging on the market or your product on the market. Then there will also be monetary sanctions, meaning that the member states will draw up some scheme on which they want to, on the penalties, which will come with whatever disregard of the PPWR. So this is also something that is not really prepared right now, because many member states are still in the process of defining their sanctions and their penalties. So we also have to see to it which will come out of this process, because each and every member states will have different sanctions with regards to PPWR.
Yeah. So this is maybe also the final joke. Find out which country does it cheapest. In case of finding you within European Union. So thank you so much, Lina. Thank you so much, Manfred. Thank you, all the audience. There's one final question. We cannot see your email addresses. Please go to the webpage of Circular Analytics. There you can see the email address of Lina and Manfred, or just contact me or Nerida or Sonia or your local member of WPO. We can forward this. As again, we will share the video and just agreed with Nerida also on the chat, on our private chat here, that we will extract the questions again out of this session and try to answer them also in a written form and give it to you somehow that you can read the answers. Thank you so much. I think it was not the last webinar we have done on PPWR because we have shown there are many, many things to discuss. Nera, please, some closing words from your side.
So firstly, thank you to Lena and Manfred, as always, so informative. I have 1,000 questions for you, which I'll ask you this week, but it was really, really informative. And we will continue this conversation because I think people do need a little bit more detail in the Declaration of Conformity, and then also how we can use the methodology, how people can start to talk to you about that risk assessment. So we will certainly continue this conversation. And for everybody here tonight, please also thank our wonderful moderator for this evening, Johannes Bergmeyer. He always does a fantastic job, and it gives me a chance to rest my voice for a change, which is wonderful. So thank you all for a wonderful webinar. If you have any questions after, please reach out to either myself or Johannes or the WPO office, and we will add them into the questions for Manfred and Lena to answer. And any other ideas that you would like for webinars in the future, please let us know, particularly around anything that's happening in Europe. So have a fantastic day for those that are starting your day, and for those who, like me, are finishing our day, have a wonderful evening, and please stay safe.